Lieutenant Jason crouched low behind a jagged piece of black rock, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The planet stretched around him like a burning wasteland. Smoke twisted into the sky, carrying the metallic scent of destruction. The war had left everything in ruins. Buildings crumbled into ash, streets cracked and dry, and the air carried a stillness that made the world feel almost dead. Jason's boots scuffed against the dirt, careful not to make a sound. His mission was simple. His orders were clear: find any remaining survivors and eliminate them. That was it, no exceptions. He adjusted the strap of his blaster rifle and scanned the broken city with sharp, trained eyes. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every corner might conceal an enemy waiting to strike. They had been a formidable species, agile, intelligent, and dangerous. But the war was over, or so the humans claimed. Most of their forces were destroyed, leaving only a few stragglers behind. Jason had carried out countless missions before, but something about this place, this silence, made the air heavy and his heart heavier. Then in the corner of his vision, a small movement caught his attention. A figure crouched behind a wall of shattered stone. Jason froze, every instinct screaming for him to aim and fire. But he didn't. The figure slowly stepped forward, and he saw her clearly for the first time. She was a girl. Young, maybe 15 by human standards, her skin glowing with an emerald green hue. Her eyes were enormous and liquid, reflecting light like molten glass, shimmering in shades of green and gold. Her hair was long, flowing like a river of dark green strands that swayed with the faint wind. Jason's breath caught in his throat. She didn't have weapons. She didn't move aggressively. She didn't even make a sound. She just stared. And in her gaze there was fear, but also something else, something that pierced him deeper than any bullet could. A plea, silent but loud enough to reach through the years of training, the orders, and the war itself. The mission briefings repeated in his mind: no survivors. Do not hesitate, follow protocol. Every word was drilled into him for years. Yet looking at this small, trembling girl, he hesitated. His hand, steady a moment ago, now shook slightly. There was something in her innocence, something in her unguarded presence that made the word enemy feel meaningless. She was not a soldier. She was not dangerous. She was a child who had survived a world destroyed around her. Jason blinked and forced his mind to focus. He was a soldier. He had seen hundreds die. He had destroyed countless homes, entire families. But this girl, she wasn't part of that calculation. He couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. He lowered his rifle slightly, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts inside him. Time seemed to stretch. The wind carried the smell of burning metal and scorched earth, and Jason realized the only sound was the faint crackling of distant fires. The girl's gaze never left him. It was curious, cautious, yet filled with a strange trust, or at least a willingness to wait. Something inside him shifted. He realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this war than orders and strategy. Maybe there was a line between survival and morality, a line he wasn't willing to cross today. Carefully, he took a small step forward. The girl flinched, her glowing eyes widening, but she didn't run. Jason crouched lower, lowering his weapon further. "Hey," he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the wind. I won't hurt you." For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly she tilted her head as if trying to understand him. Her fingers twitched nervously, brushing against the rubble at her feet. Jason noticed the delicate shape of her hands, the way her tiny body seemed fragile in a world built for war and destruction. His heart ached. All the training, all the strict orders, all the duty in the galaxy, none of it mattered here. Not when a life was staring at him with such vulnerability. Jason took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him. This girl was alive. She had survived. And now, somehow, it was his responsibility. His duty was no longer just to follow orders. It was to protect, to decide, to do what was right, even if the universe expected otherwise. He knelt completely now, making himself smaller, less threatening. The girl's eyes softened slightly, a tiny flicker of trust breaking through her fear. Jason realized that whatever happened next, this moment would change him forever. The mission had been clear. The orders had been clear. But for the first time, Jason understood that being human meant more than following rules. It meant choosing mercy. It meant choosing compassion. And as he extended a hand slowly toward the girl, he knew deep down that nothing about this mission, or the war, would ever feel the same again. Night fell over the broken city like a heavy blanket. The sky burned with streaks of orange and red, a reminder of the destruction that had swallowed so many lives. Jason sat behind the same jagged rock where he had first spotted the girl, staring at the distant horizon. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper of wind made him tense. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about her. He couldn't stop wondering who she was, how she had survived, and why she had stayed so still when she could have run. Hours passed and the streets grew silent. The wind carried only the faint sound of distant crumbling walls and the occasional crackle of fire. Jason's mind replayed the girl's glowing eyes, the way they had pierced through him as if asking him something without words. He realized he hadn't felt anything like that in years, not during battles, not during victories, not during losses. It was a strange, heavy feeling that twisted his chest. Curiosity, compassion, fear, maybe all of it. Unable to sleep, he decided to move. Quietly, he stepped out from his hiding place, scanning every ruined building, every shattered corner. There she was, still crouched behind the wall, her tiny form trembling. She hadn't moved an inch. Her eyes widened as she saw him approach, and for a moment Jason worried he had scared her. He stopped a few feet away, lowering his rifle completely. I won't hurt you," he whispered again, his voice barely audible. The girl flinched but didn't run. She tilted her head, studying him as if trying to understand his intent. Her hands twitched nervously, brushing against the dust and debris at her feet. Jason slowly reached into his bag and pulled out a ration pack, the standard issue for soldiers like him. He placed it gently on the ground and stepped back, keeping his distance. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with a tiny, hesitant motion, she reached out and took the pack. She opened it carefully, sniffing the food before taking a small bite. Jason watched silently, his heart tightening at the sight. She was alive, yes, but fragile, alone in a universe that had tried to destroy her. Every instinct in him screamed to protect her, to keep her safe from the war that had already taken so much. "You're okay?" he asked quietly. The words sounded strange even to him, but somehow it was all he could say. The girl didn't answer in words. Instead, she tilted her head, blinked slowly, and for the first time Jason saw something else in her eyes: trust. A tiny spark, fragile but unmistakable. He crouched down slightly, trying to appear less threatening. Jason realized that she wasn't just a survivor. She was a child who had endured horrors that he could barely imagine. The ruins around them, the smoke in the air, the endless war, it all faded for a moment. There was just her, small and trembling, and him, a human who had been trained to destroy, now wanting nothing more than to protect. Night deepened and stars began to peek through the smoke-filled sky. Jason sat beside the girl, careful not to crowd her. She watched the stars too, her glowing eyes reflecting the tiny points of light. For a long while neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. It was enough that they were there, two beings who had survived against impossible odds, sharing a moment of quiet. Finally, Jason broke the silence. "I don't know your name," he said softly. The girl looked at him, then pointed to herself, her fingers tracing a strange pattern in the air. Jason didn't understand the symbols, but he nodded anyway. "I'll call you Lyra," he said gently. She blinked, and though he couldn't tell if she understood, she didn't protest. As the night wore on, Jason felt a strange connection forming. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something deeper, something human. He realized that compassion, empathy, and understanding could exist even in the middle of war. The orders he had been given, the briefings he had followed without question, they felt distant now, almost meaningless. Here was life, fragile and pure, needing his choice, his protection. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if anyone would survive tomorrow or if the war would reach them again. But in that quiet night, under the glow of alien stars, Jason understood something vital. Trust could form in the smallest moments, bonds could grow in silence, and humanity wasn't just about weapons or strategy. It was about mercy. It was about choosing to do the right thing, even when the rest of the galaxy told you not to. Lyra finally relaxed slightly, sitting closer, her small hand brushing his. Jason looked at her, feeling a surge of determination. He didn't know how he would keep her safe, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't abandon her. Not now. Not ever. And so, as the first cold winds of the night swept across the ruined city, a soldier and a girl, human and alien, sat together quietly. The galaxy around them was filled with chaos, but for this one night there was trust, there was hope, and there was a bond that neither orders nor war could ever destroy. The morning light barely pierced the thick smoke that still clung to the ruins of. Jason and Lyra moved cautiously through the shattered streets, each step calculated, each shadow watched. The girl's small hand clung to his sleeve, a lifeline that reminded him of the fragile life he had sworn to protect. He had not yet decided if they would leave the planet immediately or wait until nightfall, but the sound of distant engines and mechanical hums told him danger was already near. A patrol of human soldiers moved through the city, sweeping for survivors. Their boots clanged against metal and stone, and their voices carried authority and suspicion. Jason's chest tightened. If they found Lyra, they would see her as nothing more than a target, a creature to be eliminated. He pressed her against the side of a ruined wall, feeling the warmth of her body trembling beneath his arm. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Her glowing eyes widened, but she nodded silently. Jason could feel her pulse against his side, fast and nervous, yet steady. He had hidden countless enemies before, but never had his heart felt this weight, this fear for someone's life that wasn't his own species. He realized then that war was not just about strategy. It was about choices, about the humanity left in moments like this. A patrol passed just meters away, and Jason held his breath. The soldiers scanned the ruins, shouting orders, their weapons at the ready. One of them paused near a pile of rubble, glancing suspiciously in their direction. Jason froze, wishing the girl could understand the urgency of absolute silence. Lyra's hand found his, gripping tightly. He squeezed back, a silent promise that he would not let anything happen to her. When the patrol moved on, Jason exhaled slowly, realizing how close they had come to being discovered. "You're safe for now," he said softly. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. Her trust was growing, fragile as it was, and Jason felt a responsibility that went deeper than duty, something raw and human. They moved through the ruins for hours, avoiding patrols and hidden sensors, navigating a city that had once thrived but now lay in ashes. The sky grew heavy with ash and dust, turning the day into a dull twilight. Hunger gnawed at both of them, but Jason waited until they were safely hidden in a collapsed building before offering rations. Lyra took the food with careful, deliberate motions, her glowing eyes flicking up at him with silent gratitude. As they ate, Jason allowed himself a rare moment to observe her. Lyra's delicate features were marked by streaks of dust and small scratches from debris. Her long hair framed her face like a curtain of green silk, and her luminous eyes, so different from anything human, held stories he could not yet understand. He realized that she was more than a survivor. She was a being who had endured unimaginable loss, who had walked through fire and destruction, and somehow kept hope alive. The afternoon passed into evening, and Jason knew they couldn't stay in the ruins. Patrols would return, stronger and more numerous. He guided Lyra toward a series of tunnels he had noticed earlier, hidden beneath the shattered streets. The tunnels were narrow, damp, and smelled of earth and decay, but they offered safety. Jason led her carefully, holding her hand tightly to ensure she didn't slip or fall. In the dim light, her glow illuminated their path, casting soft shadows on the walls. Inside the tunnels, they finally allowed themselves a pause. Lyra leaned against the wall, exhausted but alert. Jason studied her face, his chest tight with a mix of fear, pride, and something else he couldn't name. He realized he had grown protective, more than any mission or training had ever demanded. He had come to care for her life as if it were his own, a bond forged not in orders or strategy, but in shared danger, shared silence, and the unspoken understanding that neither would survive alone. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the tunnels, a faint scraping almost imperceptible. Jason's hand went instinctively to his weapon, but he froze. He signaled for Lyra to stay behind him, his body shielding hers. They waited, hearts pounding, listening. The sound passed, distant and harmless this time, but the reminder was clear. They were not safe. The galaxy outside was filled with hunters, with enemies who would not hesitate. And yet, inside these walls, a fragile connection had formed between human and alien. As night fully descended, Jason sat beside Lyra, brushing a lock of her hair back from her glowing face. "We have to stick together," he said softly. "No matter what." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the tunnel, and for the first time, Jason saw a flicker of hope. In that cold, dangerous place, amidst the ruins and the patrols, Jason realized something profound. The war could destroy cities, planets, and lives, but it could not destroy compassion, trust, or the bond formed between two souls willing to survive together. And as he held Lyra close for warmth and comfort, he silently promised himself that he would protect her, no matter the cost, against every order, every enemy, and every shadow of the galaxy. Days passed in cautious silence. Jason and Lyra moved slowly through the ruin, avoiding patrols and hunting for food. Every step was deliberate, every sound a potential threat. Yet in the quiet moments between dangers, something remarkable began to happen. A bond, fragile but growing, started to form between the human soldier and the alien girl he had once been ordered to eliminate. Jason realized he didn't even know Lyra's language, yet somehow they understood each other. Gestures became words, expressions became sentences. She would tilt her head or point at something, and Jason would respond with nods or soft tones, and somehow the meaning was clear. It was slow, frustrating, yet deeply intimate, a silent conversation of trust. Lyra began mimicking his speech sounds, her voice soft and musical, while he tried to repeat her alien clicks and hums. Sometimes they laughed at the awkwardness of it, small bursts of sound that made the darkness and danger feel a little lighter. One evening they found shelter in the ruins of what had once been a school. Broken desks and shattered walls surrounded them, but it was safer than the open streets. Jason lit a small, controlled fire and handed Lyra some rations. She examined the food with curiosity, touching and smelling it before finally eating. Watching her, Jason felt a strange pride and relief. She had survived so much, and here in this tiny moment she was alive and safe. As the fire flickered, Lyra reached into a small bag she had been carrying and pulled out fragments of a glowing dust from the alien soil. She let it trickle through her fingers, the tiny particles catching the light of the fire. Then she traced strange patterns in the dust on the floor, symbols Jason couldn't recognize. She looked at him, her eyes bright with hope and expectation. "What is it?" Jason asked, kneeling beside her. She pointed to the symbols and then to herself, her eyes wide, and made a small hum, almost like singing. Jason realized she was telling stories. These patterns weren't just decorations. They were history, memory, culture, the life of her people before the war had destroyed it all. Every curve, every line, every glowing dot had meaning. He sat in awe, understanding that she was sharing something precious, something beyond his comprehension yet deeply moving. For hours they sat together, learning slowly. Jason taught her how to make small traps for food, how to read basic human symbols, and how to move quietly through dangerous terrain. She taught him her alien signs, her gestures, and the meanings behind them. He learned to read her expressions as fluently as words, recognizing subtle shifts in her gaze and the slight movements of her hands. Each day, the bond deepened, not through shared blood or orders, but through trust, patience, and the shared will to survive. One night, after a day of near misses with patrols, they lay in the ruins of the school, staring at the alien stars above. Lyra reached for Jason's hand, weaving her small fingers between his. He looked at her, the soft glow of her skin reflecting the stars, and felt a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the warmth of victory or survival, it was human warmth, connection, and understanding. "You safe," she whispered in broken words. Jason nodded. "For now," he replied, though deep down he knew he would do everything in his power to keep it that way. The war outside raged on, yet in this tiny shelter they were free, if only for a while. Jason began to realize that being human wasn't about following orders blindly. It wasn't about victories or medals. It was about choices, compassion, and recognizing life where others saw only targets. Lyra, with her luminous eyes and fragile form, had reminded him of that truth in the simplest way. In the following days, their partnership became routine. They scavenged for food together, she showing him hidden alien plants that could be eaten, he showing her safe ways to move through human-occupied zones. Each day, they laughed, argued, learned, and survived together. The walls between species, the boundaries of war, seemed to crumble around the bond they were building. Jason found himself thinking less of the orders he had been given and more about the life of the girl beside him. One evening, Lyra traced a large pattern in the dirt with her fingers. Jason watched, fascinated. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly. He realized it was a map, a plan to escape the city safely. She had learned from him, observed him, and now was helping guide them both. Jason smiled, a mix of pride and awe. The alien girl he had once been ordered to kill had become not only a companion but a partner, a teacher, and a reminder of why life, no matter the form, deserved protection. As they settled down that night, the fire dying to embers, Jason whispered softly, "We'll get through this. Together." Lyra's hand found his again, glowing softly, and for the first time Jason felt not just responsibility but hope. In the quiet ruins under alien stars, two souls, human and alien, were learning, growing, and surviving, forging a bond stronger than any weapon or command. And somewhere deep inside, Jason knew that the galaxy outside, full of war and destruction, would never see a connection like theirs, and it made him proud to be human in the truest sense. The small ship hummed quietly as it drifted through the outskirts of the war-torn sector. Jason sat at the edge of the cargo hold, staring at the stars, his mind heavy with thoughts he could barely organize. Lyra sat beside him, her glowing skin soft in the dim light, her eyes reflecting the constellations above. They had survived countless dangers together, evading patrols, scavenging for food, and finding shelter in places humans had long abandoned. But now, Jason faced a challenge unlike any he had ever known, a moral dilemma that threatened to shatter everything they had built. Encrypted messages from his unit had reached him earlier that day. The remnants, they claimed, had been neutralized. The officer's tone was firm. He was to report immediately for debriefing. Orders were clear as always. There was no room for negotiation, no room for mercy. And yet, as Jason looked at Lyra, sitting quietly beside him, he knew that if he reported, she would die. The thought made his chest tighten painfully, and he clenched his fists. His training screamed obedience, but his heart screamed a different truth. He remembered the first time he had seen her, crouched behind the ruins with fear and trust in her eyes. He remembered how she had shared her stories through glowing dust and hand gestures, how she had taught him patience, understanding, and a kind of humanity he had never felt in the military. Lyra was no longer just a survivor. She was someone he had come to care for, someone who had become a part of him. And now, every order he had followed his whole life seemed meaningless in the face of that bond. Jason's mind raced with possibilities, weighing duty against conscience. He imagined the faces of his commanding officers, stern and uncompromising, expecting him to report as if nothing mattered except protocol. And then he imagined Lyra, alone, defenseless, and trusting him completely. He realized the choice was not between right and wrong as defined by the military, but between following orders and preserving life, between being a soldier and being human. He looked at her again, her small hand brushing against his, glowing softly in the dim light. Her trust was absolute, and Jason felt the weight of it like a stone pressing against his chest. He had always been trained to kill without hesitation, to eliminate threats without thought. But she wasn't a threat. She had never been a threat. She was a being full of life, hope, and resilience, the very qualities the war had tried to destroy. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that obedience alone could never define him. Following orders without question had brought death, pain, and suffering across countless worlds. But choosing compassion, even in defiance of authority, was what made a human truly human. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. Jason reached out and gently cupped Lyra's glowing face in his hands. "We're leaving," he said softly. She tilted her head, blinking slowly, trying to understand. He smiled faintly, a mix of relief and determination. "No one will hurt you. Not now, not ever, I promise." The decision was not without fear. He knew the consequences. He could be hunted, court-martialed, or worse. The galaxy was unforgiving, and soldiers whose orders were rarely forgiven. But the thought of leaving Lyra behind, of sending her back into a world that had already tried to destroy her, was unbearable. He would face whatever consequences came later. For now, she had to live. Lyra's small hand found his again, glowing faintly, and Jason felt a surge of warmth and resolve. Together, they would survive. Together, they would find a place where the past could not reach them, where the war could not touch them. He would not abandon her, no matter the cost. As night fully enveloped the ship, Jason prepared their escape. He set coordinates for an uncharted planet, one far from human patrols and war zones. Lyra watched him, her eyes wide but trusting. And Jason, for the first time in years, felt the clarity that came from choosing not orders but love, compassion, and life itself. He whispered softly as he adjusted the controls, "We'll be safe soon, just a little longer." Lyra leaned against him, glowing softly in the dark, and he felt a rare sense of peace amidst the chaos. The moral dilemma that had weighed on him so heavily had resolved itself, not through compromise but through courage and humanity. The war still raged across the galaxy, but in the small ship, moving quietly through the stars, two beings, human and alien, were free from the reach of orders, free from the cruelty of others, and free to choose life together. Jason understood now what it truly meant to be human, to protect the innocent, to value life above protocol, and to find hope where others had given up. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, he silently promised himself that no force in the galaxy would ever take that hope away. The small ship hummed softly as it glided through the outer rim of the galaxy, the stars stretching like endless diamonds across the black sky. Jason sat at the control panel, his hands steady but his mind alert, scanning for any sign of danger. Lyra sat beside him, her glowing skin illuminating the dim cockpit, her eyes wide with awe as she watched the stars pass by. The silence between them was comfortable, yet filled with unspoken understanding. They had survived together so far, and Jason knew the journey ahead would be just as dangerous. Outside, distant patrols moved through the sector, hunting for any sign of stragglers. Jason's stomach tightened each time a radar signal blinked across his screen. He had spent years trained to fight, to kill, to follow orders. But now he was on the run, protecting someone the galaxy had already condemned. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders, yet he did not falter. Lyra's life depended on him, and he would not fail her. "You're scared?" he asked softly, breaking the quiet. Lyra tilted her head, trying to respond in her broken human words. "Little scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jason reached out and gently took her small hand in his. Her skin glowed warmly in his palm, a quiet reminder of the life he had sworn to protect. "We'll be fine," he said, though his own heart raced. "I won't let anyone hurt you, not now, not ever." Lyra's eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. It was a small gesture, but for Jason it was everything. She trusted him completely, more than any human had ever trusted him in all his years of service. And that trust was both a gift and a burden. He had to live up to it. The escape was far from easy. Their ship was small, not built for long-distance travel, and supplies were limited. Jason navigated asteroid fields, dodged debris, and evaded human patrols that scanned the sector relentlessly. Lyra watched, wide-eyed, as he maneuvered the vessel with skill born of countless battles. She had learned much from him during their time together: how to read signals, how to recognize danger, and how to stay calm when everything around them seemed ready to explode. During moments of calm, they shared stories in their own way. Lyra traced symbols in the air, telling Jason of forests bathed in green light and rivers that shimmered like molten silver. Jason listened intently, translating her gestures into understanding. He told her of Earth, of oceans and forests, of the small joys of life humans often overlooked. These conversations were slow and broken, but rich with meaning. They weren't just exchanging words. They were exchanging trust, hope, and the belief that life could exist beyond war. One night, as the ship drifted past a quiet planet, Lyra leaned against Jason's shoulder, exhausted from the journey. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the steady warmth of her body. For a moment, the galaxy outside didn't matter. There were no orders, no enemies, no destruction, only the quiet hum of the ship, the glow of her skin, and the gentle rhythm of their shared breaths. "You protect me?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I will," Jason replied, his voice firm, steady. "Always." Her small hand found his again, and he felt a surge of determination he hadn't known he possessed. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and indifferent, but together they were stronger. Each moment they survived, each challenge they overcame, strengthened the bond between them. Jason realized that survival was not enough. It was the connection, the care, and the shared courage that truly mattered. The journey was not without danger. A patrol ambushed them near an asteroid belt, forcing Jason to maneuver the ship through narrow openings while lasers cut dangerously close. Lyra clung to him, but she didn't panic. She had learned from him, and together they worked in silent coordination. When the last patrol ship disappeared into the distance, both of them exhaled deeply, relief washing over them. That night, the bond between them deepened even further, not just as protector and protected, but as companions who had survived against impossible odds. As they continued their flight through the stars, Jason realized something profound. The galaxy was cruel, full of war, orders, and death, but he had chosen life over obedience, trust over duty. Lyra had shown him a different kind of strength, one that came from hope, resilience, and compassion. And now, as they drifted through the cosmos, he knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. Jason set the ship on a course toward an uncharted planet, a place far from human eyes and war zones. Lyra watched the stars, her small hand resting in his, glowing softly like a beacon of life and hope. For the first time in years, Jason allowed himself to feel peace, not just survival, but the quiet joy of protecting someone who mattered, someone who had changed the way he saw the galaxy, humanity, and himself. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, he whispered softly, "We'll be safe soon. Together, always." The uncharted planet lay before them like a promise. Its surface shimmered with soft, golden light, and distant mountains rose like guardians against the horizon. Jason guided the small ship toward a safe clearing, a valley surrounded by alien forests that swayed gently in the warm wind. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe freely, feeling the tension of constant danger slowly leave his body. Lyra sat beside him, glowing softly in the dim cockpit light, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the alien world below. They landed quietly, the ship's engines humming to a stop. Jason opened the hatch, and the scent of the planet's rich, unspoiled soil filled the cabin. Lyra stepped out first, her bare feet brushing the grass, glowing faintly against the golden light. She laughed softly, a sound that made Jason's heart ache with relief. It was a pure sound, free from fear, free from the echoes of war and destruction. Jason followed her carefully, scanning the surroundings. No patrols, no signs of danger, just life, plants, streams, and the gentle rustle of alien creatures moving in the distance. For the first time, he felt a sense of hope so strong it made the heaviness of the past weeks lift from his chest. They had escaped, yes, but more importantly, they had survived together, and that survival had given birth to something extraordinary. "Safe?" Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Yes," Jason replied softly, kneeling beside her. "For now, we're safe." But even as he spoke, he knew this safety was more than physical. They had both survived the war, the orders, the galaxy itself, and in doing so they had created a world where trust, love, and understanding could exist. Days turned into weeks as they explored the planet. Jason taught Lyra about basic human skills, reading, simple writing, and understanding food sources. Lyra, in turn, showed Jason the secrets of her species, the way plants glowed at night, how to read patterns in the soil, and how to listen to the whispers of the wind to predict storms. Each day was a lesson, each moment a shared joy. They were no longer soldier and alien, survivor and dependent. They were companions, friends, and, in ways neither of them fully understood yet, family. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors neither had ever seen before, Lyra traced symbols in the sand. Jason watched, fascinated, realizing they were stories of her people, memories she had carried across a destroyed world. He knelt beside her, letting her hands guide his own. For hours they shared stories without words, bridging the gap between species with patience, trust, and understanding. As darkness fell, Lyra leaned against Jason, her small glowing form warm against him. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Jason looked down at her, a lump forming in his throat. "No," he said softly. "You saved me too. You reminded me what it means to care, to protect, and to hope. I would not be human without you." Tears glimmered in her luminous eyes, and for the first time Jason allowed himself to cry too. Not for loss, not for war, but for the beauty of life, for the bond that had formed between them, and for the quiet triumph of mercy over destruction. The galaxy outside might rage on, filled with chaos and cruelty, but here, on this hidden planet, they had created their own world, a sanctuary born from trust and courage. As months passed, they built a small home, simple but filled with warmth. Jason planted human seeds beside alien flora, creating a garden that shimmered with both species' life. Lyra taught him to dance under the glowing night sky, her laughter echoing through the valley. Each day strengthened their bond, a living proof that compassion could survive even the darkest times. One evening, as Jason and Lyra watched the twin suns set, she looked up at him with eyes full of wonder. "Home?" she asked softly. "Yes," Jason said, smiling. "This is our home, and we make it safe together." For the first time in a long time, Jason felt complete. The war, the orders, the pain, it all belonged to another life. What mattered now was the future they would build together, one choice at a time, one act of care at a time. Humanity, he realized, was not just about surviving. It was about protecting, understanding, and choosing love even when the universe expected otherwise. And under alien skies, surrounded by life, hope, and the glow of a single small hand in his, Jason knew the truth. Humanity shone not in weapons or victories, but in the courage to protect life, to forge bonds, and to believe in a new beginning. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Jason whispered softly, "We'll face everything together, Lyra. Always." She squeezed his hand gently, glowing warmly, and for the first time in the galaxy, two lives, one human, one alien, were truly free.